Roses Red, Part 4. Marjorie wasted no time in berating me for not having made sure I had either taken Joshua's house keys or at least changed the locks. I protested that there hadn't been time to think about all that, but I had to admit I had been naive. Dunstan insisted I call the police, although there was no proof Joshua had planted the knife. I thought it more likely Giselle had done it. It gave me chills to see that wicked-looking blade jutting out of the table. The police constable who came to check it out was unimpressed. I did tell him about Joshua's suspicious activity outside the cottage the night before, and I was berated again for not reporting it. He took some photos of the table, then bagged the knife and left. Dunstan showed him out while Marjorie and I examined the damage to the tabletop. "Strange place," Dunstan said as he returned. I was bent over the table looking at the gash the knife had left. "What do you mean?" I asked, wondering if the damage could be fixed. It was a good oak table. "That officer said, what did we expect when people were stealing the rightful heir's inheritance? I don't think he's going to put much effort into catching the culprit." Dunstan's bushy grey eyebrows were raised, and I recognized his indignant expression. "It's a small community, tight-knit. They don't warm up to outsiders quickly." I tried to be dismissive. Marjorie made a sniff and then a comment about white people. "Okay, let's get some supper going. I can make us some pork chops and roasted potatoes," I announced. As I anticipated, the mention of food diverted Dunstan's attention, and he offered to help me cook. We had dinner, and then I took some sheets and set them up on the sofa. "Why don't you sleep in one of the other rooms?" Marjorie asked. She sat down next to me on the sofa and winced. "Oh no, Hope. This thing falling apart. You can't sleep here. You'll mess up your back," Marjorie declared. I smiled. She was still Drill Sergeant Marjorie, forcing everybody to do what was best for them, whether they wanted it or not. "I'm not sleeping in Joshua's den of sin, and I don't feel comfortable to sleep in Mrs. Elm's bed," I explained. "Well, that not making sense? Since when you have all these fancy feelings?" Marjorie looked at me askance. I took a breath and decided to be honest. "I don't feel like this is my place, my home. It still feels like I'm an intruder or..." I struggled to explain. "An usurper," Dunstan said. He was seated in the armchair next to us, and I thought he'd been preoccupied with the football highlights on TV. "I know Joshua doesn't deserve to get the cottage, but I don't think I should have it either," I sighed heavily. "This is nonsense Roderick put in your head from a long time," Marjorie retorted. I felt irritation prick at me. "What does he have to do with this?" I tried to keep from snapping at her. "It's all that rubbish he used to tell you. Oh, how you didn't deserve a good man like him, and you're nobody." Marjorie was merciless. I deeply regretted confiding in her, but we had been close in those days. I swallowed against the bitter memories. Roderick, too, had been merciless with his words. He thought I should give up foolish dreams of becoming a nurse with my limited education and focus on practical matters. So I had been a housewife, and then a cleaner when he said we needed more money. He wore me down over the years with his words. He made me feel ignorant, worthless, and ugly. Then he left me, along with a teenage daughter to raise. I spent years on the dole, but I worked like a donkey to get off it. I even sent our daughter to medical school, and she rewarded me by leaving me to take a job in the U.S. I shook my head to clear this last thought. She and I were doing better now, so no point being bitter. Maybe Marjorie had a point. Did I feel unworthy of Mrs. Elm's home? No, it wasn't that, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Dunstan cleared his throat, probably conscious of the tension in the air. "I'm looking forward to exploring the neighborhood tomorrow. Where's that charming tea shop you told us about?" I pursed my lips. The Waiths were hardly going to be hospitable now. I promised to make them a real English high tea the next afternoon instead. We stayed up chatting, and then they turned in. I tried to make myself comfortable on the sofa without success. Maybe I could fumigate Joshua and Giselle's room, burn the sheets, and exorcise the bed. Nope, even that wouldn't be enough. I was startled awake by someone shaking my shoulder. I sat up, frightened by the bulky outline of a man in the dark room looming over me. "It's me," Dunstan whispered. "Somebody is digging outside. You should call the police," he explained. "They're not going to come," I whispered back. "Then what do you have as a weapon around here?" he asked more urgently. I blinked and tried to think. Mrs. Elm's husband had brought back his revolver from the battle, but I doubted Dunstan would find the old relic useful. "Rolling pins and kitchen knives? Maybe some garden tools in the shed," I listed. Dunstan moved into the kitchen, surprisingly silent for a man his size, and returned with a steak knife. I stood up and crossed over the living room window and peered past the lace curtains. I caught my breath. There were two figures digging in different parts of the garden. I recognized Joshua, but the other person was taller and had a bigger build. I thought perhaps it was Giselle, but I doubted it from how competently the person was using the shovel. They were not even trying to be quiet. "Dunstan, don't!" I tried to hold his arm as he began to open the front door. He paused. "They are going to keep harassing you, Hope. Or worse." He shook my hand off and opened the front door. I flew to the light switch and turned on the living room light. Then I ran to stand in the doorway. "Who's that?" Dunstan thundered. The light fell on the two figures and they both turned, startled. I saw the light glint off Joshua's glasses, but the other figure was wearing a hooded jacket and a scarf that covered the bottom part of his face. It was obviously a man. Joshua seemed frozen, but the other man gripped his shovel with purpose and began advancing on Dunstan. I think I shouted or screamed. I heard Marjorie stumbling out of my room and come blundering up behind me. "Call the police, Hope," Dunstan said loudly. I hesitated and then ran for the phone. I heard the clatter of a shovel hitting the stone pathway that bisected the garden. I dialed, and after agonizingly long minutes, a sleepy voice answered. I gasped out that there was an intruder on my property. My ears strained for the sounds of a struggle outside, but I could only hear Marjorie's shouts. When I told the officer my address, there was a long pause, and then the officer, sounding less concerned, suggested I come to the station in the morning and make a report. I could have cried with frustration, but instead I hung up abruptly and ran back to the others. Dunstan and Marjorie were in the front yard alone, except for Mr. Smith, who was now talking to them at the front gate. Joshua and his thuggish companion were gone. "What happened?" I called, shivering in the early morning cold. "Your neighbor heard the commotion and came out to help. You're lucky to have Mr. Smith next door," Dunstan said as he shook Mr. Smith's hand. "Those two thief run off," Marjorie said, relapsing in her Caribbean English. I stared at Mr. Smith, who looked down at his feet. His eyes finally met mine, and I saw the apology in them. He nodded at me and said goodnight to Dunstan and Marjorie. He then turned and walked slowly back home. We went in, and Dunstan ordered me to go sleep next to Marjorie, while he kept watch from the living room. I was too exhausted to argue. I got up just as dawn light was filtering through the curtains, eased out of bed so I wouldn't disturb Marjorie, and tiptoed into the living room. As I expected, Dunstan was snoring away, his double chins tucked into his chest. I shook him gently and told him to go to bed. He stretched, got up stiffly, and groaned. I don't think I could fall back asleep now. "May I have some coffee?" he asked. I looked at his bleary eyes and I was touched. "It's not much of a vacation. I'm sorry." I patted him on his bulky shoulder. "We're family," he replied. He gave me the knife he'd been keeping vigil with. He stifled a yawn. May I have some coffee, please? I'll go wash my face. He turned and left in search of the bathroom. I was lucky to find a half bottle of Nescafe instant coffee in the larder. I guessed it must be Giselle's, as Mrs. Elm drank only tea. She was finally good for something, I thought wryly as I put the steaming cup on the kitchen table. I stared at the gash in the tabletop. Dunstan, wearing a t-shirt and jeans that were obviously new and too tight, came and sat at the table with some difficulty. I sipped my tea to hide my smile. Marjorie, bless her heart, still bought new clothes to travel in. I imagined she felt it would help her fit in with the foreigners. I became aware that he was staring at me. "What you going to do, Hope?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. My friend, Dr. Fineworth, thinks I should sell the place and head back to London," I said. "Do you think you could get a good price? What's real estate like in these parts?" He leaned back and I saw him wince as I assumed his jeans were causing discomfort. "I haven't a clue. But I could probably do very well. It's become a thing for fashionable urbanites to have a country getaway," I mused. "This was a gift, though," he said and looked thoughtful. "She wanted you to have this as your home." I fought a sudden urge of irritation. I never asked for it. I didn't plan to live in this backwoods. I struggled to find the words. I released my breath out of my mouth. "You're right. It was a wonderful gift, given with the best intentions. It's not her fault it's gone so wrong." I chewed my lip. This was nonsense. I was not usually so indecisive. "I'm going to stay. If someone comes along who can love the cottage as much as she did, I'll consider selling." I felt relief wash over me. I was in for a tough battle, but I was tougher. Marjorie came in, already dressed, and looked at me scandalized. "You still in your dressing gown, girl?" she tutted, and I laughed. We decided to go for a stroll into the village, and armed with my new resolve, I was ready to face down the stone-faced villagers. Before we could leave the house, however, I was pleasantly surprised when one of the local constables showed up. Dunstan handled him and was not impressed with the officer's unenthusiastic approach. I lodged a complaint against Joshua and told the officer I'd be seeking a restraining order. From the young man's face, I could tell he was shocked I would be so proactive. The officer took his notes, then stepped out in the garden to look for clues, I assumed. The phone rang. Marjorie, who was in the kitchen, answered and wrinkled up her face for a minute. "Who? What you want her for?" "No." "Who tell you that?" She continued in this vein, ignoring my raised eyebrows. "No, it's not," Marjorie declared to the caller, and hung up the phone with force. "And who was that? Wasn't that a call for me?" I asked. "Some realtor lady saying she hear you want to sell your house, so I set her straight." Marjorie pulled the brim of her Panama hat a solid inch to her ears and marched out the front door to meet Dunstan. I scratched my nose where a pimple was forming. Must be stress, I thought idly. Where did the agent hear I was selling the cottage? Village gossip, most likely. It turned out to be a pleasant morning, all things considered. The village was charming with its quaint homes, white-painted fences, and flower-lined pathways. The sun dappled through the autumn foliage as we walked along the cobblestone streets. It was so charming a picture, I almost forgot about the ugly underbelly. We walked down into the village square and passed in front the community hall, which also served as the local museum. A poster advertising a lecture caught my eye. "Oh, my friend is going to give a lecture this evening," I said as I pointed to the poster. Dr. Fineworth's million-dollar smile flashed at us from the poster. I was surprised his topic was not medical in tone. "The Tears of the Shah, an Exercise in Colonialism," Dunstan read aloud. He looked at me inquiringly and I shrugged. "No idea. He never mentioned it when we last spoke. Not that I'd expect it," I hastened to add. Marjorie was glaring at me. "He looked like a pretty boy. You better watch yourself. You know you foolish about men," she said, and humphed. "He's been very supportive. He's literally my only friend here. I couldn't help the defensive tone. Marjorie's lips curled. He even offered to find me a new placement and take the cottage off my hands. My voice trailed off. Why did I need to defend our friendship? Just because she had been right about my ex? Dunstan came to my rescue. I'd like to hear it, he said. Marjorie frowned ferociously. What? I don't want to sit through no boring talk, she protested. Dunstan laughed and grabbed her in a hug. She slapped at his hands and looked around her scandalized. Sure, we can come and listen. Marjorie can stay home, I said. She stooped. The rest of our walk puttered along pleasantly. We returned to the cottage in time for lunch, and Marjorie and I whipped up a quick cream of pumpkin soup, which we enjoyed with fresh sourdough bread and garlic butter. We laughed and chatted, and I began to feel that perhaps I could be happy in Cumberbatch Estates. It's what one makes of things, I reasoned. Perhaps, in time, I might even be able to make friends, or at least acquaintances. Dunstan added to my feeling of well-being by offering to help clean up the mess in the garden. He surprised me when he revealed a love of flowers and a basic knowledge of roses. The hope that I could actually fulfill Mrs. Elm's commission to care for her garden made me teary-eyed. We went out to take a look, and he shook his head as he looked at the mangled, dried-out branches. It's pretty bad, Hope. You lost, maybe 90% of the plants. I think somebody sprayed something on the roots too, Dunstan said. He got down on one knee, grunting, and sniffed. He tossed a few of the dry stalks around and found a few trunks that were still rooted. He made a tut-tut sound and shook his head. I felt my heart sink. He got up and nodded to himself. Okay, we have to clear all the dry stalks away and add some fertilizer to the soil. Some of the plants are still rooted, but, as I suspected, someone sprayed with some kind of chemical. We'll have to dig them up. So not one plant can survive? I asked. He must have heard how disheartened I was. You'll have to plant new. But I think with some care, a few of the originals might catch again, he said encouragingly. We worked for a couple of hours, and by the end, we were looking at reasonably neat beds of earth, ready for fertilizer and seedlings. I wiped sweat from my face and glanced up from my work to see Mr. Smith was at the gate. He cleared his throat and looked embarrassed. I noticed he was carrying a seedling in a small plastic bag in his hands. Good afternoon, he said, and then hesitated. I got up, rubbing the dirt from my jeans. I smiled. What do you think? I said, indicating the cleanup. He brightened. Fine, just fine. I saw you working, and I wanted to help. He actually flushed, and his washed-out gray eyes looked moist. Dunstan came over and opened the gate. Mr. Smith thrust the seedling at him. Come in, I said, and he walked in, still looking hesitant. He warmed up as Dunstan regaled him with the tale of our afternoon's endeavors. Oh yes, this is a very good start. You've done a fine job. Fine job. He shook his head. Imagine doing this to healthy plants. I just don't understand it, he continued. Dunstan looked at him speculatively, then reached over and grabbed up a handful of tangled roots. What do you think that is? Dunstan asked him, shoving the roots an inch from Mr. Smith's nose. The older man wrinkled his leathery face even more. Oh yes, that's a desiccant of some kind, he nodded. Oh yes, I'd say that's a herbicide. Maybe Roundup or something like that. Roses are very sensitive to it. He frowned. Mrs. Elm would never have used that directly on the roots of those rose bushes. He looked scandalized. So when Joshua or whoever sprayed this on the bushes, he was trying to utterly destroy them, Dunstan theorized. I felt my good mood deteriorating. That's a lot of trouble to go to just to make his aunt upset. Dunstan looked at me meaningfully, but I didn't get it. At that moment, Marjorie opened the door of the cottage and stood looking at our progress, with her hands on her hips. The place looking better, Hope. But I thought you all wanted to go to the lecture. It's after 5 p.m. already. She said this in such a satisfied tone I felt she deliberately waited until now to remind us. We made our excuses to Mr. Smith and rushed in to get cleaned up. I reassured Marjorie that she didn't have to join us, and she settled down to watching a BBC documentary on the lives of the Windsors as Dunstan and I left the cottage. I locked the front door, but then I hesitated. It was still light, but I had no idea how long the lecture would be. "We should come home before it's full-on dark. Joshua might show up again," I said to Dunstan. He smiled. "Marjorie can take care of herself. But I was going to suggest we leave early if your doctor boyfriend went on too long." He said this without a hint of teasing. "What? Who says he's my—" I stooped as I saw the twinkle in his eyes. "You and Marjorie need to find something useful to do," I said brusquely as he chuckled. To be continued.